Welcome to Vape News Radio, the voice of vaping. In each show, we share the latest about regulations and things you need to know, plus upcoming conferences and fests, along with interviews with the movers and shakers in this fabulous vape space. Are you looking to get into this ever-expanding marketplace? Do you want to master this industry? Listen up as Norm Bauer, the Vape Mentor, shares it all. And here's your host, Norm Bauer.
Hello and welcome to Vape Radio, the voice of vaping, and this is show number 76. I'm Norm Bauer with Vape Mentors, and today's show is sponsored by Perfect Vape. Are you a vape store, always looking for the latest mods on the market? Welcome to Perfect Vape, one of our supporters here on Vape Radio. Few distributors can claim that they have the largest hardware inventory in America, but Perfect Vape really does. They've been around since 2013, and they can really deliver the goods. What are you looking for? Maybe the Joytech AIO kit? How about the Sigelli T150 touchscreen? They also offer their own Perfect Vape liquid at tremendous prices, available in 350 flavors and all sizes. And they carry flavor concentrates from TFA, FW, Capella, and Flavor Art. They carry full product liability for your protection, but inventory is where they really shine. They strive to deliver every product at the lowest price, even direct prices from overseas. Bold claims? No doubt, but they're willing to put their money where their mouth is and guarantee you that if you can find a lower price after buying from them, they will credit you back the difference. In all these years on Vape Radio, we've never had anyone stand behind a claim like that. Visit them at perfectvape.com, use coupon code VAPERADIO and get a 5% discount and let them prove that they stand behind these claims. We also want to tell you about Level 13 Liquids. Are you a retail shop without your own house line? Do you already have your own liquids but lack consistency or confidence that they are offering you a product you can stand behind? Level 13 Liquids can get your own line off the ground in just a few days. And they can help with marketing, branding, and expansion into a wholesale channel. For information, contact me here at Vape Radio. That's Norm at VapeMentors.com. I also want to let you know that we're still offering free webinar classes on how to open a vape shop. We cover what you need to know about regulations, which are even more vitally important now, locations, sizes of your shop, and inventory. We're doing them every few weeks, and if you are not on our mailing list, you can visit VapeMentors.com and sign up for our classes. I had to totally rewrite today's show since events unfolded with little notice. As you know, the FDA released their final regs on May 5th, which killed off many Cinco de Mayo celebratory emotions, but at least now we know the outcome. No more speculating, no more wondering. We know what events are time critical, and we know what's going to take a little bit longer. With all that said, I have several interviews in store for you. One is with Alex Clark, Legislative Director with CASAA. Alex and I tried to connect over several weeks, but due to travel conflicts, we didn't talk until just now. Our topic of conversation was on states taking their own initiative and instituting laws in lieu of the FDA. I decided to carry on with that conversation and lead into the new deeming regulations as we got to the end. But the major conversations we are holding off until Vape Radio Show number 77, which I will be releasing very quickly. We have a great interview with one of the preeminent vape attorneys in the country, one that has been fighting the regulatory restrictions for years. Before we get into that, here's a little bit about what I previously wanted to cover. By now, most of you heard about the fiasco in London with Vape Jam. That's when Dimitri Agrifolius, aka the Vaping Creep, and Phil Basardo got dissed and were not permitted to speak on stage. Since it's kind of old news, we're going to leave it at that, and you can look up the details on your own or read about it in my June review in Vape Magazine. Some quick info about two events I just recently attended. One is called NATO, and the other one is called Vape Shop Events. NATO stands for the National Association of Tobacco Outlets, and it's not really a vape show, but is more tobacco focused. In years past, as much as 40% of their attendees and exhibitors were vape people, but that is no more, as this was the last year of NATO. In this, their 15th year, they decided to call it quits and strictly focus on advocacy, regulation, and laws that impede the tobacco industry. Good for them to recognize that, and we wish them well. I also want to apologize for many of you that were unable to get into our Vape Mentor site a few weeks ago. We was hacked! There was a lot of drama since the hacker was my former business partner. I will share more information and details in a future show and also an article I'll be writing for Vape Magazine about how the wrong business partner can ruin a business. What about you? Have you had any bad experience with partners? If so, I'd love to share your story as well as others so that we can all learn. The other event I attended was in Salt Lake called Vape Shop Events. This was my second one, and the next one is coming up in July. For anyone who wants to sit with a qualified manufacturer or distributor behind closed doors, this is the way to do it. It's jokingly called speed dating for vape professionals, but really, that's what it is. 20 minutes, one-on-one. I still think it's a great format, and that will also be reviewed in June's Vape magazine. I also wanted to give you a quick update on the Indiana War. Some of you may or may not be familiar with it, but if you have the April issue of Vape magazine, I've got a big story in there as well as one pending in the June issue. The line in the sand is in Indiana, and what is at stake may be the entire vaping industry if what they do in that state should carry off into others. That's going to be talked about a little bit in our upcoming interview. Speaking of which, I also wanted to give all our listeners a heads up of what we have coming up in June. It's called Vape U3 Vape Summit, and for 4 days and 20 hours, we're going to be bringing you some of the most amazing thought leaders in the vaping space to educate and empower you. We interviewed tens of thousands of vape professionals and asked them, what keeps you up at night? What worries you the most? We got hundreds of responses and drilled it down to just a few areas and then found the best people in the industry to address them. It will be held the last week of June, and it will be free. Recordings of the event will also be amazingly affordable for those that can commit early and can't make it. Along those same lines is another webinar series on contract manufacturing provided by some of the most prominent legal minds in the space. We're still working on details, but that will be available in Q2 as well. Since 2013, I've been tracking growth in different sectors, including brick and mortar, liquids, online shops, and wholesale distribution channels. Of course, the biggest growth has been in the liquid market, and ironically, they're the most under the microscope with these new pending regs. Is it worth creating your own juice, or should you have a co-packer do it? I have my thoughts and have reached my conclusions, but what about you? And last but not least, happy anniversary to Vape Radio. We are now 2 years old since we had our anniversary in April. This is show number 76. Number 77 is around the corner. So let's carry on with our interview with Alex Clark. Welcome back to Vape Radio, your voice of the vape space. This is Norm Bauer, and today I have an interview with a gentleman that I've actually tried to coordinate this interview for quite a few weeks. His name is Alex Clark. He is a legislative coordinator for CASAA. And for those of you who are maybe new to the industry, you might not know what CASAA is, and I'm going to let Alex explain that because he's going to do a much better job than I. And initially our conversation was going to be about the states that have been enacting legislation in lieu of the FDA. Well, that is now not news anymore because I'm recording this the day after the FDA new deeming regulations came out. So let's just say the last 24, 36 hours have been a little bit crazy for both of us, but we want to open our conversation with the different states and what they're all about. So Alex, welcome to Vape Radio.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right. So first off, as a preference, why don't you tell everyone what CASAA is, what exactly a legislative coordinator does, and what influence that you have and CASAA has in the vaping industry?
So our full name is a bit hard to wrap your mouth around, but I'll say it anyway. We are the Consumer Advocates for Smoke-Free Alternatives Association, and we represent the interests of consumers. In a nutshell, our mission is to protect access to vapor products. And sort of along those lines, we advocate for sensible regulations, if anybody happens to propose any, and generally things that will protect the wide variety of vapor products on the market. As legislative coordinator, a lot like what the title implies, my job is mainly focused on monitoring, tracking legislation at the various levels of government, local, state, federal. And then I spend a lot of my time on, analyzing that legislation. I work with a small team, myself, Julie Wessner, our executive director, and some other names that people might know. Greg Conley helps out with looking over the legislation, and Cap O'Rourke from SFATA. So we all work cooperatively together to really understand what's going on at the various levels. And I've spent in the past a lot of time developing copy for our calls to action and the pre-written, fully editable emails that we encourage people to send to their lawmakers. So a lot of it is really about producing engagements that consumers can use to communicate with lawmakers, tell their story, and express usually its opposition to any particular piece of legislation.
That is awesome. That's a great 30,000-foot view and all the way down to a 30-foot view of what CASAA is all about. What's interesting about the vaping industry, and for those of you who are listening, some of you might be consumers, which obviously you want to pay attention to what we're going to talk about, and some of you may be in the vape business as either retail shop owners or e-liquid producers or online vendors or wholesalers or distributors. There's a whole sector of different types of occupations within the vaping industry. But what I want to talk about, Alex, is the consumer end of it. So we have millions of people out there who have been or are current smokers who have been segueing into vaping products or e-cigarettes or any one of the two. And obviously right now there's a lot of heat on the vaping industry. So first I want to talk about some of the different states. And one of the states that has been very significant, very distinctive is the state of Indiana. And how this all came about is that I have several businesses that I work with in Indiana that let me know about a year and a half ago that the governor was planning on passing a law that would, for the most part, make it a no vaping state. And when I looked at the details of it, I said to them, the likelihood of this passing is very, very low. But unfortunately, it did pass. The governor did approve it and is scheduled to go into effect in less than 60 days of the time that we're recording this right now. But Indiana is not the only one. So Alex, what I'd love for you to do is talk about some of the what you would call most significant states for people who might be living in that state or maybe doing business in that state that maybe have tried to or are enacting some legislation that have nothing to do with what the FDA deeming regs are all about right now.
When I look at regulations throughout the various states, I tend to deal in themes. Indiana is a good example of a theme that we expect to see no matter what the FDA deeming regulations sort of what they have changed. But of course, the deeming regulations themselves also sort of go towards the same thing. And that is sort of reducing the number of manufacturers and retailers down to a more manageable size. For those that are familiar with the Indiana law, basically it sets it up so there's one security company that can meet the specific security company requirement in the alcohol and tobacco law in Indiana. And obviously one company can only handle so many clients. So I've heard from people that, I think roughly 8 to 10 manufacturers have been taken on as clients with this company, and they suspect fewer than that will actually end up had their applications accepted, and fewer than that will end up going on to become clients of the security company.
Yeah, if I can jump in, Alex, I don't want to spend too much time on Indiana, but the nuts and bolts of it is that the state of Indiana put together a fairly extensive laundry list of things that you have to comply with in order to do business in the state of Indiana. And one of them is a very, very stringent security overview, which requires the type of thing that even a large company like ADT is the largest security company in the United States, and even they cannot comply with the state of Indiana's requirements. So the problem has been, before we, beat this Indiana thing to death, is the fact that they put in so many restrictions that for the most part, virtually no company, virtually no business in the state of Indiana can exist. Maybe there might be a handful, but right now you have over 400 retail vape shops in the state of Indiana. So right now they are in jeopardy. So you use the word theme, and in a legal sense, I kind of use the word precedence. So it seems like what Indiana has done is created a precedence, which in the legal term means that something has happened that now other people can piggyback on and follow. So have other states kind of looked at Indiana and said, wow, you guys are really putting the hammer down on these, vaping people. We're going to do the exact same thing. So have you seen other people get on that very nasty bandwagon?
Yeah, in different ways. And I apologize. I sort of did take the long route to get to explaining a really simple concept. And that is, it's sort of a regulatory bottleneck.
Yes.
And it just reduces the number of people that they have to worry about imposing regulations on and monitoring for compliance and so on. So that's the theme there, is creating that bottleneck somewhere. Arkansas actually it's not really even similar legislation, but a similar effect that you have to, there's no direct to consumer sales anymore. Or from companies outside of the state. you have to go through a wholesaler. The wholesaler then sells to a retailer, and you have to buy from a shop in Arkansas. You can buy online, I believe, but for the most part, they've sort of restricted the flow to that kind of 3-tiered system.
So has that law already gone into effect? Is that already in place right now as we speak in May of 2016?
I have to check the effective date on that. If it's not already in effect, it's going to be soon. It was passed last year.
It was, wow.
Yeah. And then we did see the Georgia legislature, they sort of just copied practically word for word the Indiana bill and tried to get that through this year. That got stopped pretty quickly. So yeah, in terms of when you talk about precedents, obviously there's a perception, a public perception thing that comes along with that. But probably, oddly enough, most importantly, it's that somebody else has written the language, and it makes it very easy for lawmakers to just take that and port it into their code. There's some formatting that they have to deal with, but for the most part, they can copy and paste language all around the country. And we see that with other things, definitions of, vapor product, alternative nicotine delivery system, electronic smoking device. These things tend to just be kind of
it's like a clip and paste type of thing.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
You know what? We see it also in the private sector as well, because there's a lot of lawsuits that are going on right now. And again, we don't want to distract our conversation into those, but there's a lot of e-liquid manufacturers that are being sued for deacetyl and AP and lack of disclosure and what have you. And for the most part, there's only a handful of law firms that are doing this. And what they do is that they are suing company A, and then they take the language, and now they go on to company B and they sue them, and all they do is they just replace company A's name with company B's name. So this is a very, very bad precedent. So Alex, what I want to talk about is this word that people hear bandied about all the time, and that word is advocacy. For those of you out there who are listening who are consumers, you probably think, what the hell does advocacy have to do with me? And for those of you who are in the business, you probably feel like you're beaten over the head with this word advocacy. But advocacy is really survival. You can be apathetic and you can kind of not pay attention to what's going on and think it doesn't bother me, and you can bury your head in the sand and do all those cliche things. But the reality of it is that we have an industry that is under attack from cities, from counties, from states, from the Fed, from individuals, from all kinds of organizations, including the Heart Association and Lung Association. I mean, we are really a very small army with a very, very oppressive army on the other side. So in singular terms, Alex, what can the average person do to, quote unquote, get involved? Because everyone feels that their voice isn't heard, and it's kind of like, I'm one person. What can I do? So what can they do?
Well, get involved. It really is that simple. I empathize with I'm just one person. What difference can I possibly make? But having been involved in this issue, it's become very clear that we need lots of just one people. We have something that they don't. We have strength in numbers. And so even if it's as simple as joining with, 100 or thousands of other people to send a letter or make a phone call, that's where we have that impact. And another way to think about advocacy, it's really about standing up for yourself. I don't think that any of us enjoy being ridden roughshod over by federal regulators or, even common bullies. There has to be a time where we stand up, we turn around, and we punch back. And that's where we are. For a business owner, it's about protecting your business. For a consumer, it's about protecting your access to that business.
Right on.
And there are some very, very simple things that people can do. It does not take a grand gesture to get involved. It can be as simple as following one of our calls to action and pointing and clicking your way to sending an email to a lawmaker. It can be as simple as making a phone call. And I realize that phone gets pretty heavy when you've got to call a lawmaker. But, just getting it done once or twice, the phone gets lighter and lighter, and it becomes kind of your go-to of what you feel you need to do in order to protect yourself.
Absolutely true.
So it starts small. And you're right. We do talk about get involved, and we're sort of beating people over the head with it. But I do like to kind of take it down to the simple things that people can do to protect themselves.
All right, so I want to talk about the deemings, but before we do, I want to make sure that I give some action steps. So for someone who, you keep mentioning these calls to action, and so I want you to tell everyone very quickly what a call to action is and how they can get on your mailing list. That's one. Two, how they can contact you. And then also talk very briefly about the fact that CASAA has representation in maybe not all of the states, but maybe you can tell us how many states that CASAA actually has chapters in. And if you are in the vaping industry, you absolutely must get involved at the local level. So if you can kind of talk very briefly about what these call to action alerts are that you referenced here.
Well, I'll take your last question first. We don't have state or local chapters. That's something that we've discussed, and it's not off the table. It's just something that we haven't really had the manpower to develop. It's a pretty big task. We have a lot to worry about in terms of making sure that people are on point with messaging. And there's some liability issues. There's some optics issues that we all need to consider. So getting highly competent people that can understand those nuances, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of vetting. So we haven't quite gotten there yet. But we do offer resources in the way of talking points. And I'm, of course, accessible to talk with anybody about local issues any kind of advice that we can give to them in terms of presenting to a city council or meeting with the city council or one-on-one. I'm happy to help with that. I'll give you my email and other contact information at the end of this. So although we don't have boots on the ground in the local and state area, we do make ourselves available to support, and we're happy to do so. Calls to action generally, when a piece of legislation or a particular issue comes up, we will put together what we call an engagement. And it's typically either sending an email or making a phone call or both to a targeted set of lawmakers. And what's really important about the way that we're doing this is that we've taken out that step of asking people to go online and research who their representatives are and contact them directly. All of that is taken care of. All you have to do is come to our site or, click on the engagement and enter in your information. And the system that we use automatically connects you to your representative or senator or whatever. And we do that because they like to hear from their constituents and only their constituents. And that's very important. And it helps kind of keep the channel of communication it's more direct, it's more authentic. And it's just a more effective way to go about it. And
by the way, for those of you who aren't sure what a constituent is, it's a voter. They want to hear from their voters because they want to keep their damn jobs.
Exactly.
And they don't really want to hear from you, but they are obligated to hear from you because obviously they're put in there by the voters. And so when it comes to contacting your representative, whether it be governors, whether it be senators, representatives, what have you, the goal is not to rave about how unfair the system is. Please don't go there. It's really about, speaking your voice, about saying that, we don't agree with this particular policy, and you state your mind and you don't keep them on the phone for an hour because that's not what they're all about. All right. So let's change hats, if you will, for just a moment, because again, this is one thing that's nice about radio is radio can be very topical as opposed to print media, which has a lead time of as many as 45 to 60 days. So as of yesterday, the new deeming regulations came down from the FDA. I have my ideas, but obviously CASAA and SFATA and other advocacy organizations like you have been watching this for a long, long time. So what's your gut reaction to what happened as far as when the deeming regs come in? Was there anything there that is unexpected? Is it expected? And what, if anything, should people be doing now other than maybe not claiming that the sky is falling? Because, ladies and gentlemen, the sky is not falling, please.
The sky is falling slowly, very, very slowly.
Ouch!
But
Ouch!
I don't want to give anybody any false hope. We should all be alarmed about this, but it should be a very measured and focused alarm. And so there are some next steps that we will be talking about likely next week. Just to give everybody an idea, these regulations are 500 pages long. I personally have not had the opportunity to sit down and comb through every single page. I'm entertaining the notion of sort of live tweeting as I go through the regulations. I've already put out a few tweets. There are some morbidly humorous things in there. It's just, there's some very absurd points that the FDA is making. And ultimately our contention is that this regulation is going to be bad for public health, bad for consumer access to products that are saving their lives, and so on. So I can't really get into the finer points of the regulations, but listening to others who have had the chance to sit down with them, they are actually a little bit worse than we had expected. And I've noticed actually today, and in some of the media coverage, the FDA is sort of trotting this out as we saved the children. We have implemented regulations that will prevent sales to people under 18 years old. Just to give you an idea of how silly that is, at the time of the deeming regulations being finalized, there are 2 states that don't have a ban on sales to minors. So a monumental effort by FDA there.
Yeah, I mean, the irony is that no one in the industry ever fought the underage sale thing. And in the state of California where I am, they just actually passed a age 21 change.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone is in agreement that no, we don't want to sell to kids. And the reality of it is, and we were all kids at one time. If kids want something, and when I say kids, I primarily mean teenagers, they're going to get it. They're going to get anything that they want. So it's really just, blowing smoke. So, one thing that's interesting is that, and for those of you who are listening, don't think that someone's going to be knocking on your door tomorrow saying that, we're shutting you down. This is a very slow rollout. So I'd love, in conclusion, as we wrap this up. And by the way, thank you for your time. We obviously did a deep dive into a lot of these things, but just kind of tell everyone about some of the significant events that are going to unfold over the next 90 days, the next 12 months, and so forth and so on. And then we'll kind of leave it at that. And believe me, this is not the last conversation, ladies and gentlemen, that we're going to have about these regs. These are going to be dissected. These are going to be fought in court. You can be sure that there's going to be lawsuits that are going to be pending about this. And my personal opinion is that I think there's going to become a point in time when there's going to be a Supreme Court decision as to whether a vaping product is a tobacco product. I really believe that it's going to actually get to that point where it's going to go to that level, the highest court, to determine whether or not we are considered that we should be deemed tobacco, which obviously a lot of us do not think that that's the case. So walk us through some of the timetables, Alex, that are going to unfold over the next several months and over the next 24 months.
Again, those timetables are sort of later on in what's been published, but I can tell you immediately on Tuesday, May 10th, for those of you keeping score, that is 5/10. Nobody said the FDA didn't have a sense of humor. So on May 10th, the regulations will be officially published in the Federal Register, which is just kind of, that's official, they're out there. And then 90 days from that will be the effective date of the regulations. And I believe I saw somebody explain that in terms of if you bring a product on the market after that date, you will have to go through the pre-market tobacco application. So everything on the market prior to that date can stay on while you're getting your pre-market tobacco application together. But no new products are, I believe, allowed to come on the market after the effective date, which is 90 days from May 10th. And I think somebody put that at August 8th or August 18th. Somebody's going to have to run their own math on that. So that's kind of the immediate effect. Within 30 days, I believe, is the prohibition on sales to minors. And I think there was like 5 things that sort of become effective immediately. Again, I apologize. I have not had the time to really get into the FDA regulations in detail.
No, that's quite all right. And as I said at the beginning of this part of the conversation, this interview that we're having with Alex is not meant to do a deep dive because, as he said, it's a 500-page document. And by the way, you don't need to exaggerate. It's only 499 pages, isn't it?
I'm sorry for overhyping it.
Hey, you know what? If we can't laugh about some of this stuff, we're all screwed because it's absurdly humorous what the FDA is doing. And, I'm going to get on my bandwagon over the months to come and rant and rave about some of the realities because there's going to be a backlash here that I don't think the government wants and the FDA wants. Some of those things are going to be, I believe that we're going to see a black market come out in vaping because the reality of it is that people don't want to be told what to do. prohibition does not work. I mean, hell, we only got to look back 80 years to the late 20s and the early 30s, and we saw the growth of illegal, bootlegging and the growth of the mafia and crime syndicates and what have you. So you're going to see a lot of people in this industry who are saying, you know what, if I can't make money legally, I'll make money illegally. And they're going to start going back to the stuff that they did years ago, and that is making liquids in their own homes under less than sanitary conditions. So, believe me, there's a lot of sub stories that are going to come out of this, and that's just a little portion of my rant and rave. And just to show you, I can rant and rave as well as Phil Basardo does, because there's a lot of stuff in this industry that just drives me crazy. And I'm a business guy. Understand, ladies and gentlemen, I'm a business strategist, and so when I see business that's not being done logically, based on absurd emotions and illogic, it just drives me up a friggin' wall. And, I've got, almost 40 clients I've worked with over the last 2 years. And so there's got to be a lot more people who are going to be looking for guidance. And the reality of it is that we don't always know the right way to go. But there's certain things that we can do to prevent ourselves from going down the wrong way to go. And that's kind of what we're all here for. So, I mean, CASAA is a great organization. So you kind of mentioned earlier that you were going to give your contact information. So go ahead and tell everyone what website to visit, what email to use. I don't know whether you want personal phone calls, but you're welcome to go there if you want to. And in advance, thank you and thank Julie and thank everyone over there at CASAA for doing what you do, because it is a thankless job. Anytime you are trying to protect an industry that in many cases doesn't give a crap about you, it's a very frustrating job. So, I give you all great props. Interestingly enough, Alex, when I started in this industry in July of 2013, I didn't know anything about vaping and I wasn't a smoker. And so I started researching, and the very first organization that I ever had any exposure to was CASAA. One of the very first people I ever talked to was Gregory Conley when he was still your legal counsel and everything. And so, CASAA has been a big, big part of my education and the growth of my company. And I support you guys all the way, man.
Well, thank you. And I have to, just a couple of things. We'll say it's not an entirely thankless job. We do get some very heartfelt thank yous from people
awesome.
that come up to us at trade shows and send us emails. And it really makes a lot of this, one heartfelt thank you really makes it all worth it. And I appreciate that.
And Alex, I'm going to jump in. For every person that does that, there's probably 100 people are thinking that, but they won't make those steps to do that. So no, you're absolutely right. People do appreciate it. And I'm glad that people are actually showing you the love.
Yeah. The other thing is, yes, we have to be able to joke about this here and there, but this issue is deadly serious. I know that a lot of us can talk about the black market and where we will be able to get our supplies from in the future, but we do really have to keep in mind the 42 million smokers in this country that will be locked out of this industry and locked out of access to these products. And that's really what this is about providing alternatives for them. So not to get up on my soapbox and go down a rant, I will leave it at that and let you know that this issue is much bigger than me being able to get a gallon of concentrated nicotine to make my own in my own bathtub for my own use.
Indeed. So how do people contact you, my friend?
So our website is CASAA.org. It's CASAA.org. You can send me an email, Clark, that's ACLARK, @CASAA.org. I'm going to make you hunt for the phone number. It is on our website. It's under the contact tab, and that does forward to my personal cell phone. And right now, consumers and business owners can take action by sending an email to your congressman, urging them to support HR 2058. This bill or something like it will change the predicate date in the Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act. This is a crucial thing that needs to happen in order to help preserve at least some of the industry. And I'm going to give you a bit.ly link. It's bit.ly support HR 2058. So bit.ly/support HR 2058. And you can read about what the bill will do there. Just to clear up some confusion, there's another bit of language, actually, the Cole-Bishop Amendment, which is in an appropriations bill. This also does something similar in changing the predicate date, but there's some other language that's in there. It's slightly different, but the same spirit. Basically, we want to keep the conversation in Congress alive about changing the predicate date. So go to that bit.ly link I gave out, take action, and that will actually automatically enter you into our database. Click the box to receive emails from us, and we can keep you in the loop as to state and federal legislation as it comes down the pike.
That is awesome. Alex, listen, thank you so much for the generous time. We never know on these interviews how long they're going to go, but again, I want to thank you very personally and also on behalf of all the people who are listening. And because, this interview lasts forever and some things are going to change and some things are not going to change. But again, on behalf of Vape Radio and myself, Norm Bauer and Vape Mentors, want to thank you so much for joining us today. And ladies and gentlemen, do not go away. We're going to be back in just one moment. I know we covered a lot of ground there, so thanks for listening. I want to assure you that the vape industry is far from dead. Yes, there will be failures and closures, but for anyone that has lived through these adverse times, these situations create great opportunities as well. And I can assure you, we will be here to educate, motivate, and hopefully entertain you. This wraps up Vape Radio Show number 76, and thanks again for listening. Do you have a topic you'd like to hear, or do you have something to share? Someone you'd like us to speak with? Send me a note to norm@vapementors.com. And before we leave, I want to offer you all a great opportunity. Would you like to get your product, service, or message in front of our targeted vaping audience? Vape Radio is the #1 vape radio show in the world with more than 1.3 million downloads and over 120,000 unique views a month. We were one of the top 10 business podcasts of 2015 on Podbean and beat out more than 130,000 other shows. For just $750, you get your company integrated within 3 different vape radio shows, and we're looking for 2 more advertisers to fill our spots. How about you? Contact norm@vapementors.com. That's it for show number 76. So until next time, vape on.